Let's make pepperoni, but vegan. To get started, you're going to need a spice grinder. Ours has been used to make turmeric. That's why it's yellow. I have a teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of fennel seeds, 1/4 teaspoon of anise seeds, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of red chili flake. This you can put a little more or a little less in depending on how spicy you like your pepperoni. And a pinch of salt. Put the lid on and we blend. When that's done, we have our lovely blended powder. Next, we're going to make our slurry. Now, if this recipe looks familiar, it's because I did borrow quite a bit from Starch. He made a pepperoni and a bacon recipe, and I just thought those looked really, really great, so I wanted to make my own versions of them, but there's actually quite a bit of similarity. So I have here 1/4 cup of water. I'm going to add to that 1/4 cup of wheat starch. Now, if you are gathering your own starch from making, say, wash the flour seitan, you probably don't need the water or as much water. I have 1 tablespoon of tapioca starch, a teaspoon of pea protein, teaspoon of wine. This happens to be like a rosé, but ideally you want red. I'm going to be using this for my tomato paste. I actually really like it from the tube. You can use just as much or as little as you want. I'm using about 1/2 teaspoon. And of course, our spice blend. And then mix to combine. Make sure you really do get the wheat starch all mixed through. It likes to clump and it likes to get firm and tough and make it difficult for you. Now, when Starch did this, he made 2 different types of slurry for this. I'm keeping it simple. I'm just going with 1. To me, as long as it tastes good, I'm not really all that worried about having the little white fat bits in there. That doesn't really bother me so much. So I'm keeping it a little bit simpler than he did. Now I have here a baking dish. This is basically just a cake pan with walled sides. Just going to take a little bit of oil and just give a quick spray in the middle. And then I want to wipe out as much of that as I can. Just kind of spread it around a little bit. Do not go up the sides so much, mostly just the bottom. That's all we're really worried about. My slurry is looking a little on the thick side. I'm going to get more water. I added a couple more tablespoons of water to it. You might want to also, I just want it to be kind of like a loose batter at this point. I don't want it to be too thick. It is going to cook quite quickly on the stove anyway. So once it gets to there, I'm just going to pour this right in. If you watched our bacon video, this is a similar concept to it. It's just a little bit thicker of a depth of batter in the pan. That way, when it cooks, we get a little bit thicker of a piece of pepperoni. Now I'm going to move over to the stove. All right, so over at the stove, I have a wide saute pan with a deep lip that has some water and only about 1/2 inch. And I'm going to take the pan that we just put the batter into and just drop it into that water. And the idea is you want to kind of keep it balanced if you can. It tends to float. And we want it to be more or less even. It takes just like a minute or 2 for this to steam, kind of like making a crepe, keeping it even on all sides. And once I get it about right, I'm going to pop the lid on. While that cooks, I actually have an ice bath next to it, so we're ready when that comes out to just drop it right into the ice water. Okay, it's been like maybe 2 minutes, and it is looking pretty well cooked and dry, so cut the heat and drop it into an ice bath to stop the cooking process. And I'll meet you back over at the table. Once it's cooled for a couple of minutes, we have our block o pepperoni right here. So what I want to do now is just kind of get around the edges with a spatula and make sure nothing's sticking. If you look right here, see how that's shallower? It didn't get quite as deep there. It's not a big deal, but it is something to be aware of when you're doing these, that you want to try to keep it as even as possible. And I just want to get underneath one side so I can pull it up and whoop. I get underneath one side so I can pull it up, and you can see we have a fairly thick, it's like an 1/8 of an inch thick, I'd say. Nice crepe. Lay that down like that. Get a little bit of my wheat starch, just maybe a dab like that. Just a little bit to kind of dry it up a little bit more. It's just a little tacky. I'm only doing this so that we can stack them together and they won't stick together as much. And now we cut out our pepperoni slices. I have a little biscuit cutter here that looks like to be about, I guess that's probably 1.5 inches. That seems like a pretty good size for pepperoni slices. So I'm just going to start cutting them out. I mean, that looks like a slice of pepperoni to me. Seems about perfect. There we go. We have a bunch of slices of pepperoni, but we also have all these little extras. Now, there's nothing wrong with these extras. They're totally edible if you cook them first. So what you can do is use them like you would pepperoni, basically. Just cook them into whatever you're going to be making. You can fry them up in a pan and make them kind of like little pepperoni bites. You can crumble them up some more. There's a lot of things you can do with them. They are not a waste. So I'm just going to put them in a bag and stick them in the fridge. But these pepperoni have a destiny. And that destiny is pizza. But that's going to be in another video, which is going to be coming out in just a few days. I just wanted to show you guys how to make pepperoni. If you wanted to use these as they are immediately without putting them on a pizza, you want to get a little bit of oil going in a pan and fry them up on both sides, much like we did with the bacon. That way they are finished. You can then take them out of the pan, put them in the fridge, do what you want with them. That's it for the pepperoni video. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Bistro.